tutorial on using VMware to do a network install for Windows 7 operating system. So I'm going to go ahead by starting my VMware now. If you don't have an icon at the bottom of your screen for VMware, which that's this thing, it's like 3 arrows, you will have a folder under your Start menu. If you go to Start, All Programs, and you scroll down, you should have a folder here for VMware, and then you'll see the little VMware Workstation 12 player. You can drag and drop that down here on your taskbar and you should be able to have it. Now I have a few operating systems already loaded in here, so I'm going to just go to Home here, and when I'm at home I'm going to create a new virtual machine, and I'm going to choose how I'm going to install it. And so I can do it either with a disk, or I can do it with an image file, and I can browse for that, and that's how I'm going to do it in just a second. Or I can choose this. I will install the operating system later, and you can use a disk and a disk drive and do it, and I can show that later. But I'm going to just do it with this version right here, which I have an ISO file. And so I'm going to browse the network, and the drive you'll be looking for in order to do this is your student programs drive, which is the S drive, and in there you're going to see a folder called Hunter's Course Material. So I'll go there, and the class that I'm doing this for right now is Principles of Information Technology. I do these installs also with a computer maintenance course, but I'm going to go into the PIT file, and right here there's an OS Installs file, and right now I'm just going to be looking for Windows, and I'm going to use the Windows 7 Enterprise Edition. So I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to click on the Next button, and it's going to be wanting a product key, which I don't have. I'm just going to go ahead and ignore that, and it says you did not enter it, must be activated later. Would you like to continue? I'm going to say yes, and this one I'm just going to call Windows 7, and I'm going to hit Next. Right here I'm going to specify how large of a virtual hard disk I'm going to go ahead and provide for it. And so this is not something that's going to be utilized all at once, so it's not like 60 gigs of hard drive space is going to come off of your hard drive, but you could ultimately over time utilize up to that capacity. So whatever size you choose for it to be, you can change it and do it here. I'm going to actually take this down a little bit. I'm going to make it a 40 gig. I'm going to do 40.0, and you've got some choices here whether to store the virtual disk as a single file or to split it into multiple files. Splitting the disk will make it easier to move it to other computers. I'm not going to, so I'm going to just make it one single file, and I'm going to hit Next. And then I can do some changes to hardware and things in here. I'm not going to do anything with that. I'm going to leave that defaulted and just hit Finished. And it's going to create a virtual hard disk. And it will take just a second to go ahead and do that. And so while it's finishing that, will just take a few minutes there. Now some of the processes that you'll see in VMware are kind of slow, so you just got to kind of be patient. You also have to kind of nursemaid things along, because as we're doing installs in Windows they'll be asking you different questions and things of that nature to go ahead and react to. So this should be just about finishing up here. There we go. And so VMware is going to go ahead and restart here in just a second. There you see it. And then Windows is loading files. So what's essentially happening is I have a install file, an ISO image file for Windows 7 out there on the network, and we're doing an install into VMware, and it's going to make a virtual copy of Windows 7 inside of my physical computer disk. So now it's going to start Windows for the first time as far as the install part. See the little Windows logo. And so in a minute we should be seeing one of the first few screens for the install process. And so it's starting to set up. So it says that setup is starting. So now it's going to start copying Windows files over, and this process will take a little while to go ahead and complete. So it does that, and now it's going to expand Windows files, and this will take a little while to complete. Now what a lot of students do is whenever this is going on, they have a tendency to kind of look away from it and do different things and whatnot. If you do that, things have a tendency to not always go the correct way. Things could crash, and then you don't have time to correct them, or things that require you to respond to, you just don't respond to them quickly enough, and therefore things can stop sometimes as well. Though one issue that we do have trying to do this in a class setting that's about 50 minutes or so is that we do run out of time sometimes trying to do these things. So it's kind of imperative that you pay attention to it as you go along so that you're able to get it done. And the expansion part of the Windows in VMware can be kind of slow. Now we're at 1%. So only 99% more to go. So I'm just going to kind of stand aside while it does its thing there. I may chime in from time to time there, but I will start talking again as soon as that gets to the installing features part. Up to about 36% or so now. As I said, it's a slow process. Up to about 64%. Now, what you might notice is kind of down here at the bottom, you'll see kind of a little progress bar with some numbering systems on there. The first step, it kind of collects information, and then second step, it starts installing Windows. And so this will kind of progress along. And so since we're waiting on this to go install, I'll talk a little bit about VMware. VMware is a virtual machine utility program. Basically, you're able to view and utilize other operating systems on your computer. So for instance, the machine that I'm working on right now has its own version of Windows 7 as its primary operating system. I'm installing another operating system virtually contained inside of a program on this computer using the VMware program. Later on we'll be able to do Windows 10 install on this same computer the same way. Also Linux, we can do that as well, so we'll probably be doing a couple of different versions of them. If you are using Windows 10 operating system, actually anything Windows 8 forward, you have a virtual machine program inside of it as well, where you can do the same kinds of things. So the good thing is Windows now has this kind of utility built into it to go ahead and be able to do something similar to what I'm doing right here, right now. So we're almost done with the expansion part of the install here, up to about 94% or so. So in just a minute or so, it's going to start installing features of Windows 7 here. Because it just finished the expansion. There are the features. It's going to install updates. It's going to do a restart inside of VMware. I'm just going to let it automatically do it itself. I'm not going to hit the restart now button. VMware will reboot it. It shows that it's starting Windows. So now the setup's going to update some things, and you'll see a little blurb there about it's updating registry settings. So it's making changes to some things in Windows there. Starting services. And it's getting ready to complete the installation process and then start Windows up. So as you can see, the progress bar down here is starting to continue to grow and green up, and it just jumped a bunch right there. We're getting down toward the end part of that installation part. And after that, it should start up Windows to where we can start configuring and hopefully log in for the first time. So it's going to restart. Now it gives you the message that it's preparing the computer for first time use. It'll give you some more information. It's checking to see if the video looks right. So now we get the welcome screen. It's preparing for the basic desktop that will appear once you're logged into Windows. You'll notice this is Windows 7 Enterprise Edition that we're installing. And if you take the Cisco classes, you'll learn the differences between all the different versions, Home and Enterprise and Education and Professional, and all the different various levels that they've had in the different variations of Windows, Windows 7, Windows 10. And so we've started up, and that's our first time that we see Windows. Now it's going to ask us a few things here. One of the things it's going to ask us is to choose what kind of network this is. And so we're going to do that in just a second here. It's still got a little installer or something going there. There we go. It's wanting to install some tools for VMware. This is to just help in the process. Now you may or may not get this because on your accounts as students you won't have the admin privilege to be able to do that. So if this comes up and runs, please allow it to run. If it doesn't, just don't worry about it, because it may ask for an admin password and we're not going to put that information in there. So I'm going to let it do its thing. I'm actually going to minimize it so I can continue on here. And right here, this next little prompt in Windows is going to have us determine what kind of network we're on. And so I just want to briefly mention those. I'm going to start with the bottom one, which is a public network. Public networks are the least secure networks. You don't want to utilize a public network when you're doing your install of anything like that, unless you're intending that machine to be set up for anybody to be able to do it. And it tells you here, if you don't recognize all the computers on a network, for example, you're in a coffee shop or an airport, you have a mobile broadband, this is a public network. It's not a trusted network. For our purposes, we're going to set this up as either a work or a home. I'm going to have you guys go ahead and do it as a home network, and that would be all the computers on this network are at your home and you recognize them. They're a trusted home network. You don't choose this for public places such as coffee shops or airports. And if you're doing this on your job and you're doing it for, like, let's say we were doing it here for all the computers in the school, we choose a work network. If all the computers on this network are at a workplace and you recognize them, it's a trusted network. Don't choose this for public places. So either one of these two will work. I'm going to just choose home network. And it's going to take a second. It's going to log off. Got a couple of more little changes to make once it restarts here. Now, one of the things I'll tell you right off is that we will be using the installs that you do in class to just make all sorts of different kinds of changes to. So when it gets down to having passwords on them, this is going to just only be relative to your account, so it's not really like it needs to be secure in any way. If you put a password on there, please remember that if you do not remember the password, we will not be recovering the password, which means that you will, in essence, have to reinstall Windows in order to get back into it. So until we get to the part to where you're setting up passwords and get through that, we're not going to worry about that. And I tell students that, and then they put a password on there and they've got an issue, so just beware. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this Windows 7 account, which is a virtual account, wide open, just so that we can easily get in and out of it. So just a couple of more things. So we hear the sound when Windows is started up. And so I'm going to show you a couple of things that have to do with VMware. This up here has to do with VMware. If I use this button here, I can hit full screen mode and it'll take it, and I've got a full screen version of the OS that I just installed. If I hit it again, it'll take it back and it makes it a smaller version, and it'll freak out a little bit, but then it'll come back. So either way, I like to have it full screen so I can reach everything and see everything. You'll notice it tells me kind of up at the top that it's a Windows 7 machine. I'm going to click the start button. It will know who you are if you have it in the right configurations. Now I'm looking here, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of play around here with a couple of things. I'm going to go in here, all programs. I don't really have a lot of things installed on here right now, you'll notice. So this is just everything that comes with it by default. And we will be looking at everything in here, from the control panel to setting up passwords to doing all of these things. So I'm going to stop this install video right here with the last couple of things. What you should do every time you are working on a session in VMware, let's say now we've installed it, we've got it ready to go, is we don't want to log out of the OS, we want to suspend it. And I'll show you what that means up here. So I'm going to bring it back to where it's in this mode, not completely full screen. You'll see the bar on my actual physical computer here. And I've got this little button up here for player. I'm going to hit that little arrow, and I'm going to go to exit, and it'll bring up this menu right here. And I want to explain the difference. If I power off the machine, it's going to shut the machine down. So I may, if I do have a password scenario on there, have to log back into it. Plus, it's going to take me all the way back out of everything. What does that mean? Well, if I use the suspend mode, it's going to just leave it where I left off. So let's say I'm working in the control panel, or I'm working on a particular session or section of the operating system. I can hit suspend and it will take me right back there. So I like to use suspend, and what that will do, suspend will preserve your environment and data for later use. If you power it off, you make sure that the virtual machine is a safe state for shutdown. So basically you can lose your data if you power it off. So I'm going to go ahead and hit suspend, and it'll minimize it down here, and you'll see the little, if I hovered over it for a little while, it had a little picture there, but now it's gone. And so that's essentially a Windows 7 install in VMware.